I had the opportunity to sit down with acclaimed author Marie Elena John at a reading for her debut novel, Unburnable.
Unburnable is the story of 3 generations of African women and what drives their lives and loves. Marie Elena John craftily weaves together Lillian, living in the present day, searching for her past and her Caribbean roots.
There are definitely 2 aspects to this book. The very contemporary section, which is the story of Lillian and really her boyfriend, and how they come together and how they go back to uncover some of her past, or all of her past in the end. And then there's the plot of her past. And it's also more than just the story of one person. It's really a metaphor for your history and how important it is to know your history, the personal history, but then the history of people of African descent in general, and how debilitating it can be not to know the truth or having a warped version of what your history really is, which was the case with Lillian, and of course the case with black people in general as well.
Knowing the history of her great-grandmother Matilda and her mother Iris transforms Lillian.
I would say she was very, very damaged, and she needed to be healed through finding out who she really was, through tapping into those feelings she had for this man, Teddy, who was always there, and who she just never allowed herself to let go to. And then in the end, she was healed. A lot of people have issues with the end, which I find it leaves a lot up to the reader to come to the reader's own conclusions. But I see it as a point at which she was really healed and able to take charge of her own life and of her own destiny.
A destiny that she had once placed largely in the hands of her lover, Teddy.
I think first she looks to him as the one who can give her the answer, and because of her confidence in him and their latent love, the love that exists between them, she's able to go way further than she could have on her own. However, in the end, I think his perspective, and this book is very much about different perspectives and different, the ways we have such different realities coloring what we see. His perspective held him back from really knowing what happened, and she was able to realize that, and having come that far with him, was then able to let go and say, I have to do this on my own.
This sense of empowerment is fully reflected in John's favorite character of Iris.
I would say that Iris, which is the mother of Lillian, to me is the strongest character. Although you don't get to see things from her perspective, I think you feel her the most. I do, anyway. And I would say she is also my favorite character. And I think this is the love aspect. This book also has several love stories going on at the same time. And what draws me to her is just her innocence about what love is. Because I think we don't realize the extent to which society really puts the limits around who we can love. We think we fall in love with just anybody, but actually we don't, for the most part. We know who we will love based on who we are. And she came from the kind of place where that was not a part of her reality. It was so isolated that she didn't come with the preconceptions about her limits, and she thought she could just love. And the society of that time, which was the 1940s Caribbean, very, very class-structured, put her back in her place. And then it's a story of how she overcame that in her own way.
And she authentically portrayed Caribbean history throughout the book.
Much of it is just drawn on everything I know about Caribbean history, African history, Caribbean culture, African culture, and the same thing for the African American experience, which is there in the book. I would say to a bit of a lesser extent, but all of the 3 things are pulled together. Without giving away the end, that is where I did draw on some actual historical elements in Caribbean history, and in particular in the history of Dominica.
Her memories of Antigua also shaped events in the plot.
There's a clash of 2 bands in a carnival scene that is set in the 1940s. And I drew a lot on my memories as a child of watching carnival, and what I know of how spirits are represented in the African context, in traditional West African religions, to forge that scene. Now, with that basis, I also, when I was writing that scene, which has a lot to do with masks and the significance of masks in African culture and African religion.
Which she said is a bigger subtopic in the book.
It's not just Catholicism, but Catholicism does play a big part in it. How African religions were morphed by people of African descent, and how Catholicism, because of the rituals of the church, was one of the very good ways that African people could maintain some of their religious practices through the saints, being able to imbue the saints with some of the qualities of African gods. And then it talks about a fusion of religions.
So what makes Unburnable different than works by other Caribbean authors?
What I tried to do was to get away from something that's purely entertainment and something that's purely historical. I've read quite a few other Caribbean writers who try to do what I did, but may not have done it in a way that is as engaging. And I really wanted this not to be your typical literary fiction, which can be very slow. I'm not saying I'll never write a book that has a slower pace, but it was almost deliberate that the plot is very, very strong and very fast. And that is so that I don't bore those people who may not pick up a literary book. But yet I think I've managed to attract both, as evidenced by, the emails that I'm getting from the professors who will teach it, as well as from, the regular folks who are saying, I just couldn't put this book down. So I think that is something that's a bit different.
Critics agree. She is an editor's pick in this month's Essence magazine and is getting rave reviews from a number of Caribbean publications. She is currently working on her second book.
Unburnable has since received numerous accolades, including the prestigious Black Debut Fiction of 2006 award, given by Black Issues Book Review.